タイプってどのタイプ？
色ボケクソ野郎。
色ボケって何？
頭ん中があれでいっぱいってことだ。
なんだ、それじゃあテロップにしばらく。
Drakengard 3 is a game where you play as a psychotic, foul-mouthed homewrecker on a mission to kill her sisters and steal their boyfriends before a light session of pegging.
前も後ろも綺麗に洗って。
前も後ろも。
And of amassing a harem of sexy anime dudes, mostly, isn't your thing, well then maybe you need to reload your chainsaw and check your privilege. And that privilege is the fact that some reason Square Enix still lets Yoko Taro make games. Hi, I'm Demolition D. First of all, why is this game even on my radar, especially someone like me who mostly reviews anime and yells at his cats in terms of channel content? Well, for one, Yoko Taro. Yoko Taro is the creator of the Drakengard series and its spin-off Nier, none of which have ever really been greeted with open arms outside of Japan due to consisting of confusing plot lines and clunky gameplay on a shoestring budget, and Drakengard 3 is no exception, so at this point you might be wondering, why should I care then? Well, maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. You see, 99% of everyone who pre-ordered Drakengard 3 did so after playing Nier and was expectant of a Nier experience in terms of narrative quality, gameplay, and visuals. It's easy to find a review online of this game of someone who's not familiar with or simply doesn't care for the lore of this universe, and as such I figured I'd give my thoughts given my long-running relationship with the series and whether or not a Nier or Drakengard fan should even bother with it. And after achieving all of the game's 4 endings, to which I challenge IGN to make a similar statement, for the most part, I think Drakengard 3 delivered on some fronts and also came up incredibly short on others. Before delving any deeper, know this: Yoko Taro is a man who never makes the same game twice, and this was reflected in 2010 with Nier's departure from the Drakengardian, watered-down Dynasty Warriors meets Ace Combat gameplay transformed into a semi-open world, post-apocalyptic RPG with a universe that can scarcely even be traced back to Drakengard. And that's why Yoko Taro / Kaguya fans really play these games when you get down to it. It's for an incredibly different, strange, gratuitous, and somber experience punctuated by lighthearted comedy and risk-taking game design choices that draws in those looking for something outside the standard video game comfort zone. And trust me, Drakengard 3 is a game that makes it abundantly clear from the first mission onward that it is an experience that is going to invade your comfort zone. Now, as you may have noticed, the dialogue from the scenes I've showed you thus far are in Japanese, all uncompressed 10 gigabytes of it, and I wasn't really planning on making the subject of localization my first gripe within this video, but I've never been good with transitions. For what it's worth, if you're playing Drakengard 3's English dub, which you likely are if you did not pre-order or shell out $5 for the DLC, then you are playing a slightly different version of Drakengard. The term localization scares me for many reasons, but mostly because it's not synonymous with translation. To localize something is a very broad process.
These donuts are great! Jelly-filled are my favorite!
In the name of localization, a team can change scripts, manners of speaking, and outright lie to the viewer as to what is being presented on screen. And this can deviate from the narrative experience originally intended by the creators, and Drakengard 3 does not pull any punches with this. In the English dub, the VAs are incredibly vulgar and come off as angry or annoyed most of the time. And while yes, this is a game with exceedingly pervasive and mature dialogue, the characters are presented very differently in the Japanese dub. My biggest issue is with Zero. Bless Tara Platt's little heart, as I'm sure she did the best shit she could with the material that she was given. But English Zero and Japanese Zero are two very different characters, and that's a big deal when it's the main character. And this is why I'm going to recommend a Japanese playthrough to anyone still thinking of picking up the game. Zero is a very laid-back, almost lethargic character whose motivation is to get from point A to point B as efficiently as possible. When she says things like, "Stop talking or I'll kill you," she often does so very softly, almost lovingly even, in a disarming manner. She's also a bit ditzy and prone to mood swings, and this adds to her character. While most of the time in the English dub, she just comes off as a frustrated bitch 24/7 with dialogue that channels Dante levels of edge at some points, creative F-bomb placements included. And it's easy to see how her character may have been interpreted as such given the script and violent nature of the plot, and to the localization team's credit, I understand that dealing with such elasticity in a character may make her personality difficult to accurately capture. But, you know, it's your job. And I'm by no means saying that Zero is at all the most complex of creatures. In fact, it's her simplicity that sometimes makes me absolutely adore her, but hey, food for thought. It's not a bad English dub, it's just not the most accurate one. Zero's not perfect though, and neither is the story, but for the wrong reasons. Yoko Taro, I love you, but sometimes it feels to me like you almost derive pleasure from hurting your own sales. What do you mean, demo? Well, for one, many and most people are going to pick this game up for its story, and when you can reach the credits of a story with a completely unrelatable main character who does nothing but, spoiler, murder nice people with motivation seemingly fueled by nothing more than lust and power and call it ending A, even though nearly half the game's content is locked past that threshold, guess what? That's where a lot of reviewers are going to stop and draw their conclusions and give a final score and have a bunch of people read it and go, oh, well, that sounds dumb, and not buy your fucking game. I wouldn't want to spoil a spiritual Kaguya game aside from the murdering the whole sisters bit. I mean, it's kind of implied. So I'll say this much. After the game's third ending, yes, third ending, Zero's motives become more justifiable, and it really made me look back and see certain scenes in a different light. And then Branch D after that is just like, hey, thanks for playing all this time, here's the real game you wanted. A big theme of Drakengard 3, just like the first game, is murder, and Yoko Taro has stated this in interviews, but it's difficult to play this game and take the theme very seriously when all the enemies look and sound the same aside from the more major characters. I felt like the entire time I was playing, the game was really trying to make me care for these low poly 3D models piloted by horrible AI and voiced by some generic anime scream guy, something that the first game did better back in 2004 when it forced me to kill kids.
Still you offer no mercy.
And enjoy it, and then gave me the option to summon a pedophile, and enjoy it even more. The game takes the Spec Ops The Line approach of, hey, look at all this killing, you enjoy the killing.
Enjoy the killing.
Ain't that some shit? And when you're running around these areas with a group of people who more or less do get off sexually on some form of suffering or another, then it's kind of like, yeah, I guess that is some shit. Am I supposed to like these people? And I believe that this is how many people felt after beating Branch A, which almost felt like a parody of bad game design and characters, and set the game down before drawing their conclusions. I have a lot to say about Drakengard 3. I'd like to dissect its story and its multiple branches, perhaps in another video, but for sake of time, I'll be brief. Gameplay is like this. You go from one section of the game map to the next, and the door shuts behind you and you mash square and triangle until all of the enemies disappear. Then the door in front of you opens, and then you run down a hallway, and then the same thing happens again. And then there's a cutscene. Sometimes, but never enough, you fly on the back of a dragon. During all of this, there are sex jokes.
ライバルすごい声がしてるけど、ゼロもオクタもデカートも寝ないの？
寝るぞ。寝る前に軽く遊んでるだけだ。
え、遊んでるの？僕も混ぜてよ、僕も混ぜてよ。
いや、君とは。
That's the game. Zero often comments on this, saying things like, this is so boring going from one checkpoint to the next, as the game has you fulfill the same rudimentary tasks, such as destroying a certain number of statues or killing off mages at different corners of the desert. I hate precision jumping, she says at one point. Or, I'm getting so sick of the same thing over and over again. And this self-conscious lack of quality really makes you wonder if Access Games was given a budget at all or just a bag of warm cheeseburgers by Square Enix during development. Like, I get the joke. It's not funny. It's actually quite sad, but I mean, I get it. Nier had a lot of moments like this too, where the three main characters would talk about the game world and break the fourth wall from time to time. But the difference is that Nier had a lot more going for it because it was an RPG with a relatively large and varied world map and side quests. There was a lot more to do in terms of content, whereas Drakengard side missions are accessed via the game menu for more of the same tired combat with the same tired enemies in the same enclosed spaces, only now timed to make things even more aggravating for good measure. Drakengard 3 is a fairly competent action game when measured up against its predecessors, but the repetition and lack of variety will leave you groaning for something more substantial. If played in short bursts, it can be a very rewarding experience, as told to me by my friend, who said they felt like they were playing a classic PS2 game they had never heard of. Meanwhile, I lost sleep and beat all the game in 3 days and my thumb still hurt. To its credit, there are tons of nuances that fans of the other games will appreciate, like how the music changes when you go into the blood-drenched intoner mode, or how each of the 50 or so weapons unlock individual segments of unique origin stories each time they level up, or how halfway through the game the loading screens stop giving you gameplay tips and start describing strange things like elder sisters and cataclysmic events, a la Dark Souls. But after experiencing all the game has to offer, I must say that it is the weakest of the three in terms of narrative intrigue and presentation. Yes, the game can often come off as too try-hard or immature. Yes, it may feel like a long walk before you get to the good stuff, or at least some of the stuff more on par with what's been expected. And yes, the visuals are outdated and the frame rate sucks, especially if you're coming off of Metro Last Light on the PC, like I did. It was jarring, to say the least. I went from a good gorgeous 48 to 60 frames to a... oh god. But I'm recommending it. Why? Because quite frankly, in all of my gaming experience, I've never seen a game give less of a shit. I have never played a game that didn't care about leaving its plot contradictions and story inconsistencies entirely unexplained until after you collect every weapon in the game and finish its 3 alternate branches. I have never played a game where the best girl didn't even show up until branch C. I've never played a game with a final boss so far out of left field, so strange, so irrelevant gameplay-wise, and so artificially difficult, and yet such a great ultimate and throwback to the original. I couldn't believe that after building up these characters as essential psychotic wastes of space, they still managed to make me care for them and their fates at the very end of it all. And I couldn't believe how composer Keiichi Okabe, after being instructed by Yoko Taro to produce a sound fundamentally different from Nier, after all he never likes to make the same game twice, managed to actually create something worthy of Nier's musical legacy without completely ripping it off or overusing Emmy Evans' beautiful voice, all adding up to that incredibly different, strange, gratuitous, and somber experience I mentioned earlier. Drakengard 3 was not the game I thought it was going to be, and at the risk of sounding like an even bigger dick rider, I feel like it met its goal in that regard. A lot of Nier fans are disappointed that the game didn't turn out the way that we predicted, and for what it's worth, I think that's how this was all supposed to play out. For me, branches C and D made up for the lackluster A and B in comparison, but I've heard a lot of mixed reception in this regard. What I do know is that the more I let the game sit and marinate in my mind, the fonder I become of it, and I remember feeling the same way with Nier the first time I played it. Now all I can worry about is if there will ever be another entry in this setting with still such great potential. Would I recommend Drakengard 3 to someone who's never played the prior entries and doesn't plan to? Probably not, but if you're a fan of the series, I deem Drakengard 3 a worthy, if underwhelming, successor and prequel to the Drakengard universe. And if you've never even heard of the game and have made it this far into the video and you're sitting there wondering if it's even worth attempting to get into this incredibly quirky and intricate patchwork of lore at this point, I'd recommend that you suffer through Nier and then take it from there. There, that's it. That's all this was. It's a recommendation video for Nier. I guess that's it. Have a good one. Like the Facebook, buy my book.
Hmm.